You called Margaret Atwood's writing lazy. If you think you're not going to get a book deal because you're white, you're straight up wrong. Yes, there are no gatekeepers in self-publishing, but that doesn't mean the gate is open for everyone. I'm gonna call out Kirkus. Hey guys, and welcome to my first not vlog actual video in I don't know how long. It's been a while. I recently watched Cavanaugh's video about reacting to your unpopular writing opinions, and I had a lot of thoughts about it. I even left a comment on that video. I really enjoyed it. And then I saw Alexa Donne made a video responding to that, where she gave her reaction to all of the unpopular opinions, and I was like, you know what? I just have so many thoughts. My comments would go on forever. I need to just make my own video about this, and here we are. But before I get into it, I just very quickly, I have to say thank you so much to everybody who left a comment on my last vlog about my agent and everything that's going on. I mean, I was like just really overwhelmed with how much kindness and support and wonderful suggestions you guys left. I'm really grateful for everyone who commented and watched. Thank you so much, and you guys have given me a lot to think about. And I do have kind of, I don't want to say a plan, but an idea of how I'm going to move forward, and I will be vlogging about that and sharing it this Friday. So again, thank you so much for all of those comments. And now, the dirt. I have an axe to grind. I decided to kind of group all of these into sections that made sense to me. So we're going to go through unpopular writing process kind of opinions. Then there are some specific to self-publishing, specific to traditional publishing, and specific to authortube. And then I'm just gonna do a lightning round at the end where I give my reaction to others that I couldn't really find a category for. But yes, we are going to start with writing process, because I think this is where I get, this is the only one where I really actually got riled up, and I will explain why in a little bit here. But here we go. Okay, so I'm gonna actually group these three into one, because for me, the thing that gets me riled up, it's all the same thing. These are all under the same umbrella. Being incapable of outlining a novel and preferring the process of pantsing are two different things. The former shows a lack of discipline, the later focuses on enjoyment. Enjoying the process is the most important thing, but you should be able to outline. Underwriters are outliners in denial. And all of this stuff about Save the Cat. This one in the center saying, most people who use plot structures to plan their stories write poorly. And you can read the rest of this if you want, but study the plot structures to understand story, but please stop using them as templates for your stories. Okay. I have a question. Why don't we as a writing community get into this kind of heated telling each other what to do and accusing each other of writing poorly if we do this or that? Why don't we get like this with character development, or with world building, or just with like themes? Where are these kind of debates about at what point do you figure out your character's arc? Or do you establish your magic system before you write the draft, or do you make it fit the plot of the book and develop the magic system as it's convenient for your plot? Do you know what your theme is going to be before you write your book, or do you figure it out as you write? I'm sure we discuss these things, but like you don't ever see it get heated the way it does when we talk about plot. All this is when we talk about plotting and pantsing is when we apply structure to a story. Do you start with structure? Do you figure out structure as you go? Do you not care about structure until you get the emotions you want, and then you apply structure to a draft when you revise? Are any of these things wrong? No. They're just applying structure, which by the way is not formulaic. It's something every completed, finished story has. At what point in the process do you do it? And I think what irks me about this is that it's really tearing down the way a writer writes. And this is going to be something that I am going to bring up repeatedly throughout this video. But when I see stuff like this, I get defensive, not as a writer, but as a teacher, because I spent 7 years teaching creative writing workshops for kids and teenagers. So like age 9 through 18. And I see how fragile their spark of confidence that they have a story to tell is, and how easy it is to snuff it out. And I'm sure people who leave these kinds of comments saying, if you do this, you write poorly, don't intend to crush a writer's spirit. But if a certain writer reads that comment, that is what it will do. It will make them think they are a fraud. We all suffer from imposter syndrome when we first start writing, okay? So why are we so quick to throw out these generalizations and accusations as if there is one true and real way to write a book, when it's just going to crush an aspiring writer's belief in themselves? If you need a template to write a book, then use a template. It doesn't mean your writing is going to be formulaic. If you are terrified of the idea of outlining because you feel like it crushes your creativity, don't outline. It's valid not to outline. Just write your draft and have fun with it and see what happens. These are all valid ways to write a book. And the idea that anyone has the audacity to throw something out there like, someone who does this writes poorly. Like, you're gonna tell me you can take every single novel that has ever, been lauded with awards, been praised, been celebrated, has a big readership, a big following, all of the novels, and tell me that none of those writers ever used Save the Cat or used the snowflake method or pantsed. I mean, you will, for every book, every good book out there that resonated with readers, you will find an author who did it different from the other authors, because every writer is different and all our processes are going to be different. And how about, instead of judging it and getting all insecure and saying, oh, well, I outlined, so pantsing is like, you lack discipline, or, templates don't work for me, so if you use templates, your writing is formulaic. How about we just support each other and say, I hope you find what works best for you. Let's do that, okay? Cool. Moving on. Speaking of judgmental, first person narrative is lazy writing. Let's play first person novel roulette. You called Margaret Atwood's writing lazy. Okay, yet another one, here we go. Word count goals are actually detrimental to a lot of people because they don't focus at all on the craft. We reward people who can write a lot fast without looking at what that person is actually writing. For some people's writing days, they can do more work in 1K words than in 10K words if those words are actually going to be useful for later drafts. Pause, because up until this point, I'm with this comment, and I think Alexa and Kate both said this very well, but the short version is 10K in a day. That kind of title gets clicks on a video. So, and word counts, it's just so easy to say, oh, I wrote a lot of words, I'm going to celebrate my productivity. I agree with this comment. I will say word count is somewhat important because, I've said this before, I'll say it again, novels are made up of quantifiable words. So like at some point you do have to write 50,000 or however many words to get to the end. But yes, overall, however many words you can write in a day, we overhype it. Totally agree. But then we get to this. I find people who draft slow but steady tend to have cleaner work and actually end up being more efficient. Allow me to tell you two tales. Tale number one. I had a student once, a wonderful young girl, absolutely brilliant, so creative and so excited to write a novel. But she was such a perfectionist that in one 90-minute writing workshop, she never wrote more than 3 sentences. And we talked about this. I mean, I worked with this girl for a year. Every session we talked about it. She understood that going over and over her words and editing, oh no, I don't like that. She understood it was holding her back, but she really couldn't help it. So this kind of slow and steady thing, I would argue that if you are someone who struggles with perfectionist tendencies to the extreme, this is not true for you. You need to just write words and get them out. I think that the whole quality versus quantity thing, something we lose in that debate is that when you're starting out in particular, you need quantity to get to quality. Very few writers sit down and have beautiful prose flow out of them at the very first try. You have to write a bunch of garbage sentences to get to the good ones, to figure it out, you know? So yeah, go for higher word counts, relatively, whatever high is for you. I mean, that might just be 200 words, fine. Because this girl was only writing like 10 words at a time and then deleting them, so 200 words for her would be a lot. That would be great. So there's one tale. I don't think slow and steady is always the best advice to give. Tale number 2 is about a writer who proves this to be completely freaking untrue, and I wish I had thought before I hit film on this to actually just contact this author and ask them if I could name them specifically, but I didn't, so I will keep their identity a secret. But I have a critique partner and friend who years and years ago, we were both writing at the same time, and we were putting our work in a Google Docs and sharing them and like reading chapter by chapter and cheering each other on. I would be in this person's Google document as they were drafting. I can attest to the fact that they wrote lightning fast, easily over 5,000 words per a couple of hours session, sometimes much more than that. And the prose that came out of their brain, I like so much envy, so much respect, and so much joy, because since then this person has gone on to, they have a number of books under their belt and are on many lists, and honestly, truly have earned more starred reviews than I can count. I can't think of how many at this point, and starred reviews are tough to get. Tons of success, tons of just critical acclaim, well earned, okay? They write faster than any writer, any author I know personally. And I am like, I visually could see it happening in the Google document, and their prose is, on the first draft, is like, would be amazing for me on like a second or third draft. So no, factually untrue. The truth is, once again, all writers are different, all processes are different, and some writers can write real fast and it comes out brilliantly. For others, the push to write 5,000 words in a day or whatever, yeah, that might crush them. That might be to their detriment. But the way to discuss this is not to shame any one way. It's to say all of this is like, writing slow can be good, writing fast can be good, finding somewhere in the middle can be good. What kind of writer are you? You need to write and figure it out and see where you find success, and that's your process. All right, on to the next one. When people say that one of their author dreams is to have their book adapted into a film or TV show, I start to suspect that they don't actually love novels as a medium and instead just want the attention popularity that comes with a successful franchise. Okay, I have to say I thought of a specific person when I read this one, and it made me laugh because years and years ago they gave an interview in which they essentially said this. They wrote a book imagining that it would become a big franchise, and it did, and it kind of bummed me out and also made me laugh because well, okay, glad it worked for you. So yeah, I think some people probably do feel this way, but I definitely don't think that wanting a movie deal or a TV deal or whatever means you don't love novels as a medium. I mean, you know, first of all, I don't like all of the generalizing that happens with a lot of these unpopular opinions, so I'm just gonna speak for myself. You know, I would love to get a film deal or a TV deal. I would love the money. I would love the fact that, right or wrong, this would make publishers want more books from me, maybe. I would definitely be extremely nervous about the fact that it's hard for me to think of any author who hasn't risen to like that kind of level of success where there's a big franchise around them and they haven't gotten, I don't know, I just feel like getting canceled over something would be inevitable. And in some cases, some authors do or say terrible things and deserve the criticism and backlash they get. In other cases, it's like you see authors getting torn apart for something that happened only in the movie, of which they probably didn't have much control. The level of scrutiny would scare me, so I don't know. But the other thing is, I never actually talked about this on his channel, but I actually do have a little bit of TV writing experience. Oh, I even feel a little... That's even probably taking it too far. The short version of it is, when I moved to New York, I got a job with a little startup production company, and they had a head writer already, and I joined the staff, and they had a TV show, a pilot, that had been picked up by HBO. Ultimately, this was never greenlit, but we did get as far as auditioning for the cast and casting it, and then we did a table read. And we had 3 episodes, and I got to write the first episode with help from the head writer. And so I got to sit at the table and like hear all the actors read my script, and it was super fun. I mean, it was like a huge learning experience. I really enjoyed it. I would have been thrilled if it had turned into a thing. But having done that, I can say with 100% certainty that if I had to choose between Hollywood writing and writing novels, like 100% novels. There's zero question for me. I love novels, but I do think you can want this and still love this. Oh, this one's really fun. You don't have to read to be a writer. Just engaging with anything creative and being aware of how and why it works is more than enough. Like, does this apply to any creative endeavor? Like, I like going to museums and looking at paintings, so I should be able to play the flute, no problem. I don't understand this at all. Okay, actually, no, that's not true. I'm gonna give a 2-part answer to this. Part number 1, this reminds me of when I was in college. I was a music major, and there was a certain type of college music major who will say things like, oh yeah, I'm a jazz studies major, and you know, I play drum set, but I don't want to like listen to Max Roach or Philly Joe Jones or whatever because I want my sound to be fresh. Like, first of all, bro, you couldn't sound like them if you wanted to. Second of all, like, no, if you want to be a musician, you listen to music. If you want to be an artist, you consume art. Does anyone ever go to Hollywood and say, I want to be an actor, but I never watch movies? Like, no. I don't even understand why someone would want to write a book if they did not enjoy reading a book. Okay, now, but on to my little devil's advocate part 2 of this question. We're going back into my teaching experience here, because when I taught creative writing workshops for kids, most of the kids who came to my workshops were there voluntarily, and they loved writing. They were nerds about it. It was great. But there were always a couple of kids whose parents signed them up against their will because they hoped it would help them to get more confidence in their creative writing skills. What would happen is that I would talk to this kid who's like kind of sullen and not really wanting to be there. What kind of books do you read? I don't read books. Okay. And then I would go for this: movies, TV shows, video games, comic books, and graphic novels. There is no kid, you find me a kid who doesn't like comics or graphic novels, movies, TV shows, books, or video games. At least one of those. There's always something. We would talk about those things until I found the thing that was the spark, where they lit up and they wanted to tell me all about it once they saw I was interested. And I would guide the conversation into story. What is the story in, Fortnite? Fortnite and Minecraft. I got a lot of those. I cannot tell you how many 9-year-old, 10-year-old boys I had who would start out in my writing workshops writing about Minecraft or Fortnite. And I would help them find a protagonist in it if they didn't already have one. And as they wrote about it and just got to describe all the stuff they wanted to describe, I would start working in some storytelling, like suggestions and guidance. And sometimes it would take weeks, sometimes it would take the better part of a year, but sooner or later, those kids would come in and say, I want to write about something different today. And they would start writing their own story. And I was there for 7 years, so I could see this happen with many of them. They would become readers once they saw that they could tell a story, it made them want to seek out stories elsewhere. So I just kind of want to add that as like a caveat. Sometimes, especially when we're talking about kids, you need to meet them where they are. If a kid doesn't like books, that doesn't mean they won't one day, and that definitely doesn't mean they can't be a writer. They can't write creatively. Any kid can write creatively. It's when we shut them down that they believe that they can't. So I guess what I'm saying is, as a teacher, I think my approach to this is to meet someone where they are and help them find their way to a love of storytelling and stories through whatever means you can. Okay, so I actually put a call out on my community tab for more unpopular writing opinions to kind of mix up with the ones that Kate and Alexa talked about. So here's one from Kanashi that I thought was really cool. I don't know if it's unpopular or not because I've seen things online where people are either strictly against or for it or somewhere in the middle, but my take would be grammar in narration being the same as character dialogue, full of wrong word usage and improper grammar and all, so long as it fits the character whose POV we're in. Yeah, to me, this is like really a case-by-case kind of thing. With things like dialect and accents, it's easy to go overboard in the way you type it to try to like force the reader to hear it. But what it does is it makes it difficult for the reader. It slows down the reading process because they're constantly having to translate because so many words are shortened or spelled out phonetically instead of, you know, grammatically correct. You don't want to slow the reader down. And that is true for dialogue and narration. But I will say, I do think that if this protagonist is your narrator, is your narrative voice, then it should be in their voice. They would turn a phrase in the narration the same way they would turn a phrase in dialogue. You just want to be careful with like the visual aspect of it. It still needs to look clean enough that the reader can read without constantly stopping to translate in their heads, if that makes sense. Let's talk about authortube. Most of the writing advice givers online these days really can't walk their talk in their own prose, but we'll never know because a lot of them never actually publish. I have seen a few channels that made me raise a skeptical brow, but I want to add something a little more to this in addition to what Kate and Alexa said, because I agree with a lot of their thoughts on this and I don't see any need to rehash that. What I want to say is something that I've actually wanted to talk about for a while, but I've been afraid to, and that is scammy writing courses. Savvy Writes Books recently had a really great video about the author to guru pipeline, which I will link up here. I highly recommend watching it. She really does her research, and in it she has this fantastic spot-on analogy to the gold rush, where people who went out to California to look for the gold, once it started to run out, what did they do to make money? They started selling shovels to the next round of people who came to California looking for gold. It's very telling how hard it is to make a living writing books, that there are so many writing courses out there, and specifically some with some like eye-popping prices. And the reason I've been hesitant to make my own video about scammy writing courses is because I'm afraid of coming off as a hypocrite. Like, I left a comment on Savvy's video where I said, I couldn't agree with this more and I am terrified I'm going to become this. Because I have courses, I have virtual courses, and I was coming from it from a place of, oh, I taught writing in classrooms, and so teaching online would be the same thing but virtually. And it wasn't until I joined YouTube and I started getting those ads. This happened to me a lot last summer of 2020, where I got these increasingly douchey ads about starting an online course and how you don't have to be a teacher to start a course, and it's really not that hard to throw a course together, and you just have to make it one time and put it out there, and literally you can become a millionaire. Because if there's one thing we know about teaching, it's that it's a guaranteed path to riches. It's very confusing to me, and it's hard not to get sucked into the hype about it, but it's also just, I will say this, if you see a course that is like thousands of dollars, you'd better be getting as a student a ton of one-on-one in-depth critique of your work. When you see a course that's $1,500 and it's literally just a bunch of videos and a workbook, run. The other thing that really bothers me about this, and I think it ties into the whole writing advice thing, because if you're giving writing advice, you are attempting to teach in a way, right? Is that just because you are good at a craft doesn't mean you're a good teacher, because teaching is a craft unto itself. And it's extra frustrating to me when writers who teach writing aren't actually very good at writing either, because then that kind of feeds into the whole those who can't do teach thing, which I hate maybe more than anything, because if you can't do the thing, you have no business standing in front of a classroom telling others how to do the thing. But anyway, I know this comment wasn't about the online courses, although I do think that's a topic worthy of discussion. But as far as like the writing advice videos, I think in a lot of cases it's just people are trying to build their channels, and the best way to build a channel is to have a searchable title, something that someone is going to be actually looking for when they use YouTube as a search engine. And it's very easy to just kind of regurgitate some generic writing advice that you've heard or read elsewhere on the internet, and yeah. I think that's unfortunate, but it definitely happens. AuthorTube is often just an excuse to procrastinate writing for both the creator and viewer. Sure, often it is. And often it's a source of inspiration and motivation for both author and viewer. So I think this is just a matter of like each individual finding their balance. Doing AuthorTube hinders rather than helps the creators writing the majority of the time. It is a totally different job that has to do with performance and entertainment, and if you are not careful, it can very easily lower the quality of your writing. I mean, sure, sometimes, yeah, I'm sure it does. I disagree with the majority of the time, and I can't imagine how anybody would be able to prove this is true, but I can definitely speak to this. I think I've talked about this before, but when I started writing a book, that was in 2007. In 2009, I co-founded a blog with like 5 other women, and it was about young adult novels. It was called YA Highway. Back in the days of blogs, it was actually pretty successful, and I put a ton of work into it because it was part of the whole social media, build your platform. I wanted to have it as like a credential when I started querying literary agents, and that's valid. It's nothing wrong with doing that. But when I did leave, it was after quite a few years. It was because I had gotten an agent, but I still hadn't managed to sell a book, and I felt like I was floundering and putting more work into the blog than I put into my own fiction. And yeah, at some point you have to figure out when that is a problem and make the right decision for you. Next one. So much of the creators fall into the same demographic, white women in their 30s, and it's difficult to find diverse content since themes seem to be all the big channels. Kind of tired of seeing the same kind of person talk about the same things on this platform. 100% true, and I think Kate said this, but it's not just AuthorTube. This is true of almost any community on YouTube. I am a viewer / lurker in a whole lot of other YouTube communities, and it's very frustrating to me because when I look at the channels I have subscribed to, it's pretty diverse. But when I look at what's recommended on my homepage, it's not. When you look at your homepage, you will get a mix of recommendations from channels you are subscribed to and channels that you're not, and the nots for me are overwhelmingly white. That's really frustrating. The algorithm until it changes, it's on us to seek out and support marginalized creators, including here on AuthorTube. Now, speaking of, let's look at this next comment. All of the navel-gazing about whether or not AuthorTube is dead is only interesting to creators themselves and not their viewers. It's also kind of disrespectful. If it's dead, how come we're watching the 6th video on this topic? Okay, so I've watched some of those videos and read the comments. I've never commented on it myself. I didn't want to weigh in because I felt like I was still kind of new and like I don't know the full history of AuthorTube, and I don't know. To me, it seems like the people who are really making this assertion, AuthorTube is dead, are people who were fans of authortubers who were white women in their 30s who either aren't making videos anymore or whose channels have pivoted and they don't do writing videos anymore, and they are mourning that loss instead of seeking out new authortubers, especially diverse ones. So that's my hot take on that. I mean, we like to say authortube is a small community, and it's like, it is compared to, like, say, the beauty community on YouTube or the health community on YouTube, but it's not small. There are so many writing videos and writing dedicated channels out there. I am still discovering some pretty much on a daily basis. So the dead thing, it just sounds to me like people are bitter that their faves are gone and they don't want to watch any of the new stuff, which, sorry, doesn't mean it's dead. Okay, it takes more than passion for writing author lifestyle to make it on the platform. Without decent editing skills and something new to bring to the table, one might as well not try. I definitely disagree with might as well not try. I watched a Skillshare course once about being a YouTuber, and I can't remember which one it was or who the instructor was, but they said something about how every successful YouTuber has one of three things really strong: either personality, the filmmaking quality, or the editing. Something special about the editing. And it's not to say that plenty of them have all three, but like one is really what makes their channel shine. And I find myself thinking about that a lot when I watch YouTube, because I can see how it's true. I follow this one woman, it's not an authortube channel, it's in a different community, and they don't have like the best camera. It's not about that at all. The editing isn't really anything special, but the personality. I watch every upload because I will go anywhere with this person. I will go to Walmart with this person. I don't care. I just find them so engaging and so funny. And yeah. And then there are others where I see like someone's sense of humor and personality actually really comes through in the way they edit their videos. And that's really what makes the channel special. It's not to say they don't have a personality. And it doesn't even mean the camera quality isn't good. It's just like, that's the thing. So I think there is something to be said here, but I also think it would be easy to misconstrue this and say into being something like, if you're not like a comedian or an otherwise like celebrity like engaging person, and you don't have mad editing skills, and you don't have like a ridiculous Peter McKinnon style camera setup, then you can't be successful. Like, no, that's not true at all. I can't say being a YouTuber is for everyone, because plenty of people would not enjoy this at all. But if you think that having a YouTube channel, if that sounds really appealing to you and you think it's something you would like to do, you can definitely do it. And it's just going to take making a lot of videos before you figure out what it is that makes your channel special. All right, and our last authortube hot take is a lot of people like creating videos more than they like writing. I mean, sure, I'm sure that's very true. This falls under that umbrella of the larger issue, which is that people like the idea of being an author or what they think being an author looks like, and they enjoy putting the image of #author life out there without really acknowledging that it's completely unrealistic. And that's not just an authortube thing. We can find this anywhere on social media, especially Instagram. And it's hard, because when you first start out especially, you feel this pressure to build a platform and build an online presence, and you convince yourself that all of this work you're putting into this, creating this author persona online is work too, but it turns into procrastinating from actually writing. And I think probably now some people get so into it that they don't give themselves enough time to write to figure out that they don't actually want to be a writer. Okay, this next one, I'm just gonna read the first part of it because it cracked me up. AuthorTube is one of the only YouTube communities where it's more about the aesthetic of doing the activity than the actual activity itself. Please name a community on YouTube or any social media platform with a visual medium and tell me where you can find a community where this isn't a problem. We are all about the aesthetic, period. We have been for years and years now putting fake, beautiful versions of what we want people to think our lives are online. And now we're at a point where we write think pieces about how it's all fake, and we seek out authenticity, and we have to go to therapy because we feel so much pressure when we look at what everybody else's life looks like, even though we know that's not really what it looks like. And like, no, this does not just apply to authortube, this applies to life. On to self-publishing, with the usual caveat that I am not a self-published author, and so I'm going to do my best to not mess anything up, but take everything I say with a grain of salt because I don't have that experience. First up, not everyone can indie publish well. True, anyone can upload something, but the point of indie publishing is to have your work found and read. So truly, to indie publish well, have good cover art, have it well edited, ads, etc. takes a level of financial privilege that many don't have. Saying anyone can do it while ignoring this fact is often unintentionally ignorant to the lack of privileges people have. Yeah, I completely agree with this. There are barriers to entry just as there are with traditional publishing, it's just different kinds of barriers. And if we really want to get into it, I would say that writing a novel itself for pleasure and hope of profit, that act alone takes some level of privilege. Because I'm guilty of saying this, and I know a lot of people are, is, you know, you make the time, you have to sacrifice something if you want to write a novel, because we writers hear so often, we hear people say, oh, I've always wanted to write a book, but I don't have the time. And it's like, no, you know, stop binging Netflix at night and sit down and write your novel. That's how the rest of us did it. But the truth is, of course, there are tons and tons and tons of people in this world who genuinely do not have that luxury. They don't have that time to give up. I'm sure some people would see this as an unpopular opinion and would get up in arms about it because a lot of self-published authors put so much resources into it that they could have put into other things. They have made sacrifices, is I guess what I'm trying to say, in order to see their dream of putting their book out there and hopefully finding as many readers as they can. And nobody is denying that. I think this is just one of those things where the word privilege gets people a little riled up because they mistake it for meaning you're spoiled. You've had this handed to you. You haven't worked hard. And that's not true. You can work hard and also have privileges. It's just saying you do have some advantages that you won't see or perceive unless you compare yourself to this person who does not have those advantages. So you can sacrifice things and like give up things and put a lot of your money into this, and nobody is saying that's not real, but also the privilege is real as well because a lot of people don't have something they can sacrifice to see their dreams of publication come true. I think the whole, oh, traditional publishing isn't working out for you, why don't you just self-publish thing? I think that also gets people a little bit riled up because yes, there are no gatekeepers in self-publishing, but that doesn't mean the gate is open for everyone. All right, next one. This was actually a new one from my community tab. No matter how hard many self-published authors work and how great their books are, we'll never be able to get over the self-published books are lesser quality. Because it is so easily done for every person who puts in the work, there will be dozens who submit without editing or anything because they can, and it drowns out the quality books. Now again, I wouldn't say never, because I think eventually both self-publishing and traditional publishing are going to evolve into something that we don't recognize and can't predict far into the future. But I absolutely agree that this is an issue self-published authors face. Like, I can't imagine debating against this because it's true. It's true that there are some incredible self-published books out there, but they are buried in the sheer volume of books that people slop together and throw up there just to see what sticks. Pumpkin spice almond butter, because I'm going to make it befall through sheer force of will. All right, we're gonna start this traditional publishing section off with one that I got on my community tab. Instead of looking only for underrepresented voices, as the trend appears to be now, agents and publishers should take in writers based on how good their story is, not their skin color, sexuality, etc. You hit on it with the word trend. Publishing turned own voices into a trend, which is why organizations like We Need Diverse Books are not using the phrase own voices anymore. And that is really unfortunate. This is just what happens when you have an industry that is by and large made up of mostly well-meaning, white, straight, cisgendered, able-bodied people who have been called out on decades upon decades of racism and every form of bigotry you can imagine, and are trying to course correct. But the real change that we need won't come until the staffs at these houses at every level are as diverse as the books they publish. And Ramona, the person that left this comment, I want you to know that everything I'm about to say from here on out is not directed at you at all, because I don't think this is what you meant by your comment. But I feel like I need to speak to a certain audience of mostly white people, because I've had this conversation in private with some white authors who will use this kind of statement to kind of bemoan the fact that they see themselves as now oppressed in some way. In other words, you can't get a book deal anymore if you aren't a marginalized person. First of all, fact check yourself on that. If you find yourself thinking that, all you have to do is go to Publishers Weekly and look at the weekly deal announcements and look at the authors who are getting book deals, and you will see that this is not the case. It's not true. Like, factually, okay? I understand that, yes, like a lot of books by marginalized people and about marginalized people are getting a lot of press right now and getting a lot of bigger deals. And I'm not denying that, but like, if you think you're not going to get a book deal because you're white, you're straight up wrong. And two, this problem actually negatively impacts marginalized authors far more than it does anyone else. And the first example that comes to my mind is, I'm sure you've all seen and read the stories by now of several queer authors who were not out, who wrote books about queer characters, and they were basically forced to come out before they wanted to in order to justify writing about characters with those experiences. And that sucks. That is own voices weaponized. And third, please remember, it was not long ago, like just years ago, where it was very commonplace for editors to reject a book by saying something like, this was absolutely lovely, but we already have an Asian American book on our list this season and we don't need another one. And now we have mostly these same editors who are finally starting to see what is so problematic about that, and they're veering hard in the other direction and like shouting from the rooftops how much they want diversity and giving so much of their support to those books. And just, if this frustrates you and you are not part of a marginalized community, just imagine how devastating and infuriating it must be to be, for example, since I started with this one, an Asian American writer who heard that rejection for years and years and years, and now all of a sudden they're all clamoring to publish you, but you know it's just to tick that diversity box. Like, when does this author get to be taken seriously? Because now they know that they're published, but there are people who are going, well, it's just because she's Asian and they're just all about diversity right now because that's the trend. Like, that sucks, because it's never about the quality of your work when you're a marginalized author, is it? When you're asked to sit on diversity panels and own voices panels and just talk over and over again about your own experience, and like, what about being on a world building panel or getting, you know, asked questions just about your writing process in an interview? I was on a panel once, and again, I haven't asked this author if I could share this story, even though this was a public panel and I'm almost 100% positive they wouldn't mind it, but just to be safe, I will keep the identity a secret. But I was on a panel with a wonderful author once. Their debut novel had just come out, and it was an own voices story, and they had an arc of their second book at the panel and showed the cover, and the cover was a white protagonist, and they talked about how they deliberately did this because they did not want to get pigeonholed into being the author who writes about insert marginalized community here, because they wanted the freedom to write about any characters, which is the freedoms that all white, straight, able-bodied, cisgendered, etc. authors have had for all time. And I thought, you know, I could sense, even the way they spoke about this, I could sense a little bit of underlying anger and defensiveness, just a little bit, that made me think they had gotten pushback on this decision from the publisher, who wanted them to write another Own Voices book so that they could slap that, you know, check off that diversity. I can only imagine what that author had gone through, and it's hard for me to begin to imagine how frustrating that must have been, and I'm very glad they won that fight and wrote the book they wanted to write about the character who was not, you know, at all in their particular community as far as their identity went, because yeah, authors should have that right. It is a great thing that publishers and editors are coming to terms with the decades and decades of racism and homophobia and general bigotry in this industry. And it's unfortunate and unsurprising that the way they are handling it is still harmful to marginalized authors. What we need to see, and again, I keep talking about this, this is a video I had in the next one in this series that I have been intending to make in a while, about specifically salaries and other things about the publishing industry and these houses themselves. But until these staffs, from editorial to marketing to publicity and at all levels, are as diverse as the books that they publish, and more importantly, just reflect our world, then we're going to continue to see this struggle of houses that are so homogenized trying to scramble to make up for decades of, you know, a failure to represent all voices. Okay, the next one. If traditional publishing doesn't drastically change, it will not exist by the time the next generation of writers comes of age. I mean, I have to agree with Alexa on this one. It feels like every generation, or a few times every generation, there's some like doomsday, like this is gonna destroy publishing. I mean, it was ebooks, and before ebooks, it was like, I mean, paperbacks. There was so much fear around paperbacks, and you can keep going back. No, publishing is just going to evolve. It is not going to go anywhere. Absolutely disagree with this. But it is going to change. It is going to change a lot. And the next part of the comment says, Amazon sucks, but it has also become a necessary evil for self-published and indie authors. I mean, yes, Amazon does suck. I have a whole video on this, but I agree. They have both self-publishing and traditional publishing by the you-know-what. All right, here's one from my community tab. I really don't like that people assume publishers do a lot of marketing. It's possible, sure, but only if you're lucky enough to be one of the few. Please cover this. Oh, I have covered this. Publishers put most of their marketing eggs into just a few baskets, and I have a whole series of videos where I interviewed an anonymous marketing publicity salesperson who had experience at several of the big four, and I will link the first video to it up here. But yeah, 100% yes. I don't even think this is an unpopular opinion. I think I think most people know this, or at least most writers who are pursuing traditional publishing have come across this fact by now. All right, this one's interesting, and I have something to add to it. Spoiler-free book reviews are bland and generic unless it's a rant, but I'm never convinced that people didn't just tolerate the book, because it seems like every review is just the same, or is the same just with different terminology, genre terminology sometimes. The world building was so lush and the characters just come to life, etc. Okay, I mostly do agree with this. It's hard to write a good review. I think that's why you see a lot of mimicking of the same phrases that other people say. If you ever watch like cooking or food channels, the way they just say things that they've heard on Food Network, it kind of makes me giggle. It falls under the same, you know, the same category here. But anyway, I'm gonna go off on I'm gonna take advantage to get a little bit on a high horse here, and I'm gonna call out Kirkus, because this has bothered me for a while, and I'm sure I have missed it, but I haven't come across discussion of it for years now, like years and years ago. Kirkus, I think when We Need Diverse Books was gaining traction, Kirkus made this decision that in every single one of their reviews, they were going to like basically list the diversity. Like, these characters, these are the characters of color, these are the queer characters, blah, blah, blah. And it was, again, with the best of intentions, but oh my God. Okay. First of all, a Kirkus review is like 250 words, maybe 300 words, and like half of it is spent summarizing the book. So you have precious few words left to give an actual critical take on a book. And sometimes discussing a character's identity or the way it's portrayed is a good and necessary critique, but most often, because they do this for literally every single review, most often it's just a list. And I'm going to actually use one of my own Kirkus reviews as an example, because this one just like it made me laugh, but not in a good way. For the first Secrets of Topsy book, we have the review, and here at the very end, Davy presents as white, but several other central cast members are specifically described as dark or light-skinned and are so depicted in the frequent line drawings, semicolon, one has two moms. If you look up just go look up Kirkus reviews of any books, you will see something similar. And it's like, how is this not othering? I feel like they're just reducing all of these characters to tokens. It's hard for me to figure out how to put into words why this irks me so much, and I have read other reviews of other books in Kirkus. The way they handled it was far worse than what I just read from my own review, but I guess it just feels like throwing in phrases like, one character has two moms, apropos of nothing, just others that family, which is like the opposite of normalization. I don't know. This bothers me. If it bothers you too, and you are better at articulating why, please let me know in the comments. Okay, lightning round time. First one up is, fan fiction is as legitimate a medium as poetry or novels or short stories. Fan fiction I have talked about lots before. I think it's wonderful. I have nothing but respect for fan fiction writers. When I have students come into my workshops and they want to write fan fiction, I'm like, yes, go for it. I think Alexa put it best when she said that there are definitely cases where there's fan fiction out there that's where the writing is superior to the original. 100% true. But also, writing original fiction takes additional skill sets, just the creation of characters and worlds, etc., that you don't get to utilize in fan fiction. But nothing but respect for fan fiction. Yeah, I agree with that. Next one up is, you can actually 100% judge how good a book will be based on the first chapter alone. It's not a good sign if the first chapter isn't good, because it's usually the first thing a writer writes, and it's the thing we spend the most time kind of picking over and trying to make it absolutely perfect. But that said, I also agree with Alexa here in that there are some books out there that just take a while, like several chapters, to hit their stride. And so I wouldn't say this is 100% absolute truth all the time. Next one, it takes more perseverance than talent. I mean, generally, yes, I agree. I guess, as with pretty much everything else in this video, I don't like the absolutes. We can't say this is true all the time. The word talent is a really loaded one, as Kate did a really great job of discussing. I will just say, because I can't speak to everybody else, just my own experience, that for me, I don't feel like I started out with like an exceptional amount of writing talent. A lot of what I wrote in the early days was not great. So for me, this is a very true statement. It took perseverance much more than talent is why I was eventually published and have a career. This next one. You shouldn't publish a book YA if it has any sex scenes in it. It should be in the adult genre no matter what. But you're cool with violence, I bet, right? Yeah, I could not disagree more with this. I mean, first, just real quick, I feel like, in case anybody out there is confused, A novel with a sex scene or two or whatever in it is not the same as erotica. Erotica is a different genre. We are not talking about erotica. But yeah, there are young adult novels out there with sex scenes in them. And you know, there are teenagers out there who have sex, and there are teenagers out there who don't. And pretty much all of them are going to have questions about sex at some point or another. And it's really hard for me to think of a safer place for them to explore those questions than fiction. So, disagree. And let's end this on a high note. This comment from Shantae. Readers' social media sells books, but author social media doesn't. Or at least it's minuscule compared to a publisher and often not worth the time, effort, and sacrifice of mental health. Yeah, yes, hard agree. Thank you very much, Shantae. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. This was a ton of fun to make. I would love to hear what you think about all of these, and if you have a channel and you end up making your own video about it, I would love to just continue the discussion and hear what you have to say. So please let me know if you make that video in case I don't see it because I want to watch it. And that's gonna be it for this video. I will see you guys Friday with another vlog.